There's a quiet signal beneath your thoughts, subtle, almost imperceptible, like a vibration you can feel but not name. It's been calling you not to do more, but to remember more. Tonight, you didn't land here by accident. You arrived because something in your frequency aligned with these words. So pause for a moment. Are you listening from your bed? A quiet room? Somewhere between sleep and waking? Wherever you are, you're exactly where you need to be. Take a breath. Let this moment soften you. This is not a lesson in effort. It's a remembering of resonance. A gentle, poetic exploration of how your body, mind, and frequency shape the way reality forms around you, not by force, but by presence. In this story, we'll explore how your nervous system carries more weight than your intentions, how your future self is not something you chase, but a frequency already living inside you. And we'll do it softly, slowly, with space for your awareness to settle. So subscribe to the channel and allow this story to meet you where you are. Because beneath all the effort, there's a signal already guiding you. And once you tune into it, everything begins to shift. There's a strange sensation that's been following you lately, subtle, persistent, not quite loud enough to demand your attention, but impossible to ignore. It lives beneath your thoughts like a soft frequency, a gentle hum beneath the noise of daily effort. You felt it in the pauses between distractions, in the silence after a sigh, in the way your body sometimes knows something your mind hasn't caught up with yet. It isn't urgency, and it isn't fear. It's something older, something waiting, something that doesn't shout, but resonates. You can't always explain it, but you know it's there, a quiet knowing that life is not random, that what's unfolding around you is part of a pattern you're only beginning to remember. And maybe that's why you're here now, not searching for more information, but to understand why all the effort hasn't brought the shift you were promised. Why everything you've done, the journaling, the breath work, the meditations timed with full moons and retrogrades, still feels like a reach. Like something is always just out of sync. Like the universe heard you, but never quite responded. But what if it did respond? Just not in the way you expected. What if the universe doesn't respond to effort, but to resonance? Most teachings emphasize action. They say, do this, add that, try harder, align more, as though there's a secret combination to unlock the life you dream of. And so you build rituals like scaffolding. You light candles at dawn. You write intentions with careful precision. You breathe in for 4, hold for 7, release for 8. You repeat affirmations in the mirror, hoping that this time the echo will bounce back as truth. You read books that promise results, enroll in courses that guarantee energetic shifts, and still something doesn't quite click. The outcome flutters at the edge of your reach, shimmering like a mirage, never quite landing. So you double your effort. More tools, more structure, more spiritual productivity. But here's the quiet truth no one seems to emphasize. The quantum field isn't tracking how hard you try. It's not measuring your commitment by how many rituals you complete. It doesn't care how many hours you meditate or how many journals you fill. The field is listening for something else entirely. It's listening for your signal. And your signal doesn't come from your effort. It comes from your coherence. Your signal is not what you do. It's what you are while you do it. That's the part most people miss. 2 people can repeat the same affirmation, I am worthy, and emit entirely different frequencies. One speaks it from knowing, the other from desperation. One speaks it with a nervous system that trusts, the other with one bracing for rejection. On the surface, they're identical, but in the quantum realm, their broadcasts are opposites. That's because the field doesn't respond to your words. It responds to your vibration. It mirrors your essence, not your effort. And if your effort is rooted in anxiety, lack, or compensation, then the signal is scrambled. The field reflects confusion. It doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're broadcasting from noise, not clarity. Let's ground this. Picture someone named Eli. He's done the work. He wakes before sunrise, lights a candle with intention, speaks his desires aloud, and journals his gratitude every day. His routine is sacred. He's read about alignment, listened to podcasts, followed every coach and quantum mentor he can find. And yet, his reality doesn't budge. Money is tight. His relationships feel thin. He feels unseen by the very reality he's trying so hard to co-create. Until one morning, exhausted by his own striving, Eli skips the ritual. He doesn't light the candle. He doesn't reach for his journal. He just sits. Not to manifest, not to recalibrate, just to breathe, just to be. Something loosens in him. His body softens. His chest opens. And in that stillness, something changes. Not outwardly, but inwardly. A signal clears. That week, a call arrives. An invitation. A collaboration he never forced into being. And it fits. It feels natural, not manufactured. As if it had been waiting for him to stop pushing long enough to finally receive it. This is the difference between chasing a future and becoming the frequency that future responds to. Eli didn't make something happen. He allowed it to arrive. And he allowed it not through force, but through coherence. In that moment of presence, his nervous system wasn't defending, performing, or bracing. It was safe, open, aligned, and the field responded not to the stillness, but to the clarity within it. Quantum reality is strange, but not chaotic. It's ordered in a way that doesn't fit linear logic. In the quantum world, nothing truly lands until it's observed with coherence. You've likely heard the phrase, particles become matter when observed, but what determines how they collapse into form? Not just observation, but the quality of observation. If you observe with fear, hesitation, or doubt, your field responds with delay, distortion, or static. If you observe with clarity, trust, and openness, the reality reflects that tone. Because you are not passively watching your life. You are shaping it by how you witness it. And the field mirrors the vibration behind your gaze. Here's what's strange. Most people try to manifest from a survival state. They visualize while anxious. They affirm while doubting. They intend while holding their breath. The body is not at peace, and so the frequency emitted is not peace, it's tension. It's bracing, it's resistance. And the field doesn't decode your words. It decodes your nervous system. If your body doesn't feel safe with what you desire, it will push it away, even as your mind begs for it. This is where true transformation begins, not in thought, but in safety. You can shift your entire signal, not by thinking a new thought, but by letting your body feel a new truth. This is the root of coherence. Not perfection, not performance, but internal congruence. When your thoughts, emotions, breath, and body are saying the same thing, the field gets a clean message. That's when the timeline moves. That's when manifestation isn't just possible, it's inevitable. And here's the quieter layer beneath. That your desires aren't random. The things you long for deeply, consistently, in ways you can't logically explain, they're not accidents. They're messages. Not from your ego, but from your future self. That version of you already exists somewhere in the field. And when you feel that ancient longing, it's not a command. It's a reminder. Not all desire is sacred. Some of it is noise, distraction, compensation, illusion. But some of it hums. Some of it returns even when you try to forget it. Some of it waits silently until you're quiet enough to feel it again. That's the kind to follow. Not with chasing, but with becoming. Because here's the deeper truth. Your dream is not something you pursue. It's something you tune into. It's a frequency, a version of reality already vibrating in the field. Your work is not to force it into being. Your work is to clear the distortion that says you can't have it. And most of that distortion doesn't live in your thoughts. It lives in your body. This is the part that doesn't get talked about enough. The body isn't just a passenger. In your spiritual journey, it's the vessel that decides if you're ready to receive. You can train your thoughts, refine your words, deepen your affirmations. But if your nervous system still associates success with pressure, or visibility with rejection, or love with abandonment, it will gently sabotage your progress, not out of failure, but out of protection. That's how deep the pattern runs. Your body obeys safety more than intention. It listens to frequency more than philosophy. And that's why alignment isn't something you think into place. It's something you feel into reality. So many people try to override this with discipline. They believe if they just work harder, stay focused, stay spiritual, they'll finally push through. But they don't realize that their very striving is a sign that the body doesn't yet trust the outcome. Striving, by nature, is a survival. Impulse, it's a way of saying, I must control this or I'll lose it. But when you're truly aligned, when your body and your mind are broadcasting the same signal, there's no need to grip. You don't hustle your way into clarity. You let clarity shape you, and the field responds to that softness. Not to force, but to flow. You've likely felt this at least once. A moment where you weren't trying, and yet something aligned. A message arrived. A friend reached out. A payment cleared. A moment unfolded so precisely that you couldn't have orchestrated it with all your plans. That wasn't luck. That was resonance. You were in the right tone, even for a moment, and reality harmonized with it. The invitation now is not to wait for those moments, but to learn how to live in that tone more often. Not perfectly, not constantly, but consistently enough that your life begins to reflect it. This is coherence. When your breath slows, when your muscles soften, when your thoughts no longer contradict your emotions, when your inner world becomes a clear frequency instead of a chaotic broadcast. In neuroscience, we know that when the heart and brain fall into sync, when the rhythm of the heart becomes ordered, the brain begins to function differently. Creativity increases, stress reduces, intuition sharpens. Why? Because coherence is the natural state of an aligned being. And alignment isn't just spiritual, it's biological, energetic, practical. Imagine your inner world as a tuning fork. If you strike it while tense, it vibrates unevenly. The sound is distorted. But when you hold it gently, allow it to ring without interference, the note is pure. The field can hear it. The possibilities around you can recognize it, and they begin to arrange themselves accordingly. You don't have to push reality into shape. You just have to stop vibrating against it. And yet, we are rarely taught this. From childhood, most of us are taught to perform in order to receive, to earn rest, to deserve love, to prove worth. So it makes sense that we bring that same energy into our spiritual journey. We think if we just do enough of the right things, the field will reward us. But this is not a reward system. It's a reflection system. And it reflects what's truly present, not what we wish were true. That's why the field often seems silent. Not because it isn't listening, but because it's waiting for you to stop broadcasting contradiction. To stop saying, I trust, while holding your breath. To stop saying, I'm ready, while your body is still in defense. To stop saying, I surrender, while secretly gripping the outcome. This isn't judgment. It's just physics. You can't outtalk your signal. You can only soften it into alignment. So what does it mean to soften? It means returning to the now, not as a strategy, but as a sanctuary. The present moment is where your frequency lives. Not your ideas, not your scripts. but your actual felt experience. And if, in this moment, you are bracing, then that is the frequency being amplified. The good news is, you can shift it, not with effort, but with presence, with honesty, with breath. Try this now. Inhale gently through your nose. Let the breath fill your belly, not just your chest. Hold it softly, not with tension, but with reverence. Then exhale slowly, as though you are releasing resistance itself. Do it again and again, until something inside begins to loosen. You are not doing this to fix yourself. You are doing this to feel yourself, to let your body remember what safety feels like. Because only then can it allow the life you're calling in. Your system needs evidence that safety is possible. That expansion doesn't mean abandonment. That visibility doesn't mean punishment. That love doesn't mean loss. And breath presence is how you begin to offer that evidence, not through logic, through vibration, through experience. Because once your body feels safe, it stops blocking what you desire. It stops filtering every opportunity through the lens of danger. It starts saying, maybe we can have this. Maybe it's okay now. Maybe we can receive. And when that signal changes, everything changes. This is why some people manifest with ease and others struggle despite doing everything right. It's not because one is more spiritual. It's because one is more coherent. Their system isn't fighting itself. Their body trusts the reality their mind is calling in. They aren't performing safety. They're embodying it. And embodiment is the real magic. That's where frequency becomes form. That's where timelines shift. It's also where most people give up because it feels too simple, too quiet, too slow. But slow is not stagnant. Slow is sacred. It's the rhythm of roots growing underground, of stars forming in silence, of lives rearranging themselves in invisible ways. If you're reading this, you're not behind. You're not broken. You're not blocked. You're broadcasting a signal you haven't yet been taught to hear. But that signal is real. It's under the noise, under the narratives, under the strategies. And it's trying to guide you home, to a version of yourself that isn't chasing anymore. That isn't bracing. That isn't performing. A version of you that isn't louder, just clearer. Because clarity doesn't shout. It resonates. There's a moment, often small, often missed, when you realize the thing you were reaching for is already pulsing inside you. Not fully formed, not loudly but undeniably alive. A faint awareness. A shift in how your chest feels when you stop performing. A calm that enters when you no longer rush the process. That is not failure. That is coherence becoming felt. It's the beginning of a signal clearing beneath all the noise. You don't need to force clarity into being. You simply need to stop reinforcing the distortion. Not everything has to be healed before you can receive. Not every wound must be closed. What matters is whether your system can hold space for what's next without flinching, without armoring, without needing to predict or control the shape of its arrival. And that begins with safety. Again and again, we return here. Because the frequency of your future self is already stable. The only thing that wobbles is your capacity to hold it. And that capacity isn't found in thought, it's found in breath. This is where the work becomes sacred, not as striving, but as surrender. Surrender not to fate, but to frequency. To allowing what's real within you to become louder than what's rehearsed. So much of what we broadcast isn't conscious. It's inherited, absorbed, performed. We become fluent in lack, fluent in fear, fluent in effort. But we were not born with those languages. They were taught, which means they can be unlearned. And the relearning? It happens in the quiet, in the softness between distractions, in the pause between inhale and exhale, in the nervous system that finally exhales without apology. That's where you meet the version of yourself you've been waiting for. You see, your future self isn't separate from you. They aren't watching from afar, waiting for you to catch up. They're already pulsing inside your field, humming. A frequency that you sometimes hear in dreams, in intuition, in the random calm that descends without reason. They're not impatient. They're simply consistent. They don't need you to become perfect. They just need you to become present. Because presence is how timelines collapse. It's how future selves become embodied. Not by reaching out, but by reaching into the silence, into the resonance, into the part of you that already remembers what you came here to be. Here's something strange. Sometimes the thing you're chasing isn't actually your desire. It's your trauma's idea of safety. Not all ambition is alignment. Some of it is avoidance. And the only way to tell the difference is by how your body responds. Does the thought of your desire create contraction? Do you feel urgency, tightness, guilt, dread? That's not your dream. That's a pattern trying to be resolved through success. But true resonance feels different. It doesn't spike your cortisol. It doesn't require performance. It invites your system into a deeper exhale. It feels like home. This is the work that doesn't glitter on the outside. It won't fill a social media post. It won't always feel like progress. But it's the most powerful recalibration available to you. And it's quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't scream, but rearranges everything. Slowly, lastingly. Not because you earned it, but because you allowed it. So how do you allow it? Not by abandoning your practices, but by transforming your relationship to them. Light the candle not to force a breakthrough, but to honor your frequency. Speak the affirmation, not to convince the universe, but to remember who you are. Journal not to manifest, but to reflect your signal back to yourself with love. Let these be offerings, not transactions. Devotions, not demands. And let your breath be the guide. Your breath is not just a tool. It's the bridge between your conscious desire and your unconscious permission. Each inhale carries possibility. Each exhale reveals whether your system trusts it. Learn to listen. To your breath. To your body. To the parts of you that still believe you must perform in order to receive. And when they rise, don't argue. Don't resist. Breathe with them. Offer them presence. Because even the parts that sabotage your dreams are doing so out of care. They were formed in moments of survival. And survival was their sacred task. Now your task is different. To teach those parts that it's safe to do more than survive. It's safe to thrive. It's safe to soften. It's safe to be seen. And when that becomes embodied, not just understood, but felt, then the signal changes. The frequency stabilizes. Not because you've unlocked some cosmic hack, but because you've stopped hiding from your own coherence. You've stopped resisting the version of you that already holds the life you dream of. You've stopped editing yourself to be acceptable. And instead, you've become resonant. Let's take this deeper. There's a shift happening globally. More people are waking up not in fireworks, but in whispers. They're sensing the distortion of effort without alignment. They're tired of hustling toward a version of life that never quite feels like arrival. They're beginning to notice that the outer world cannot reflect what the inner world cannot hold. And they're turning inward not to escape, but to restore. This is not retreat, it's return. And the signal guiding it is ancient. It's been echoing through time, waiting for bodies soft enough to carry it. You're one of those bodies. You wouldn't be here otherwise. You wouldn't be reading these words if you hadn't already tuned in, if even faintly, to that signal. You may not always trust it. You may still argue with it. That's okay. The signal doesn't need your certainty. It only needs your presence. Because presence creates the coherence that thoughts alone cannot. And coherence changes everything. Not by rearranging the world for you, but by making you available to what's already aligned. the relationship that doesn't drain you, the opportunity that doesn't require self-erasure, the version of success that feels like exhale instead of armor. You don't manifest that by wanting it more. You manifest it by matching it in tone, in nervous system, in frequency. So stop asking what more you need to do. Ask what part of you is still afraid to receive. What part believes the next chapter must hurt before it heals? What part still thinks rest must be earned? These parts don't need to be punished. They need to be reprimanded. Not with words, but with safety, with rhythm, with presence, because that's the signal the field responds to. Not effort, not noise, not trauma, but coherence. Quiet, sacred coherence. And if you've ever wondered why certain things haven't landed, it's not because you were undeserving. It's because your field was still tangled with contradiction. You wanted love, but braced for loss. You wanted success, but feared what it would cost. You wanted clarity, but hid from stillness. None of this makes you wrong. It makes you human. And now it makes you ready. Not for perfection, but for presence. That's the message you've been receiving all along. Beneath the practices, beneath the plans, beneath the identity you've been performing. The hum beneath the noise isn't asking for effort. It's asking for embodiment, for the you that no longer needs to justify your becoming, because your future isn't something you step into. It's something that steps forward through you. The moment your signal stabilizes enough for it to arrive, that moment is close, closer than you think. And it doesn't need to be earned, that it needs to be allowed. That is a kind of beauty that unfolds when you stop trying to rush coherence. When you stop asking your reality to hurry and instead allow your frequency to settle, even just a little longer, into the truth of what's already humming beneath your surface. This isn't about patience in the traditional sense, not waiting as a test of discipline, but the kind of patience that arises when you no longer believe you're late. When you stop living as if your life is a race to be won and begin to recognize that every breath is part of your arrival. Your resonance is never behind. It's only ever obscured by the static of striving. And the static clears not with action, but with intimacy, with the self you've spent years trying to become, not realizing she was always beneath your noise. Is the paradox? The more you perform worthiness, the more you delay it. The more you try to earn alignment, the more your body whispers, "We must not have it yet." And the field listens to that whisper. It doesn't decode your calendar or your commitment. It mirrors your tone, the subtle emotional tone that vibrates beneath your affirmations, beneath your habits, beneath even your most spiritual discipline. That's the real transmission. That's the real magic. And it's either distorted by fear or refined through safety. And here's what safety often looks like: gentleness. Not the kind that coddles you into avoidance, but the kind that holds you steady when your old patterns want to run. The kind that doesn't scold your fear, but welcomes it as an artifact of your survival. Because that's what most resistance is: a signal from an old self who once had to brace, who once had to hide, who once had to perform love in order to receive it. But you're not in that story anymore. And even if your body hasn't fully caught up yet, your awareness has. And awareness is the doorway through which frequency upgrades. You are not healing to become more deserving. You are remembering that you always were. Healing is not the process of fixing brokenness. It's the art of removing what was never truly yours. The inherited urgency, the ancestral shame, the collective conditioning that taught you to trust effort more than intuition, sacrifice more than safety, productivity more than peace. When these begin to unravel, there is disorientation, but also clarity. A sense that maybe all the spiritual noise wasn't the path, but the pause between the signal and your ability to hear it. You've likely been told that transformation is about doing more. But what if it's about doing less with more integrity? What if it's about walking slower, but in the direction of your coherence? What if your future isn't waiting in the distance, but underneath the noise you keep replaying because silence still feels dangerous? This is the emotional frequency most people skip. Silence as safety, stillness as a signal. Most of the world is addicted to motion, to proving, to loudness. But in the quantum, silence is not absence. It's presence concentrated. It's potential vibrating without distraction. And when you enter it, not to escape, but to listen, you begin to feel the gentle rhythm of your own field returning to baseline. The breath deepens, the mind quiets, the heart stops performing, and the body says, finally, I remember this. And that memory begins to reshape your signal, because you don't shift timelines with declarations. You shift them with embodiment. You shift them with the way your spine aligns when you stop apologizing, the way your breath softens when you stop gripping, the way your voice steadies when you no longer need to convince anyone. You shift timelines when you inhabit yourself fully, not the curated version, but the coherent one, the one who no longer waits for permission, the one who no longer pretends she doesn't know, the one who doesn't chase light, but becomes it by remembering the dark was never the enemy, only the silence before remembering. There's something holy about your contradictions, something sacred about the way you still try to reconcile all the versions of yourself, the achiever, the wounded child, the observer, the mystic. They are not here to be eradicated. They are here to become integrated. Wholeness isn't about editing yourself into clarity. It's about holding all of you in coherence, not perfection, not harmony every moment, but consistency in presence. Because the field doesn't require that you be fixed. It requires that you be here, and when you are, something begins to soften around you. The way people speak to you changes. The way opportunities unfold becomes less jagged. The rhythm of life begins to hum in a way that matches your own. Not because the world finally changed, but because your signal did. And that signal, quiet, refined, coherent, is the most powerful form of instruction you can offer the quantum field. It's not a shout, it's a tone. And when that tone stabilizes, everything you once chased begins to arrive not as reward, but as resonance. Here's the thing most people don't realize. The shift isn't supposed to feel like fireworks. It often feels like exhale, like peace where there used to be urgency, like nothingness where there used to be striving. And because it feels so different from the noise, many people miss it. They think nothing's happening, when in truth, everything is aligning. Stillness isn't stagnation. It's coherence made visible. And coherence is the birthplace of every miracle. The key now is not to rush the unfolding, but to practice presence long enough to stabilize the tone. To remain aware even when the mind wants to grasp. To remain soft even when the old patterns want to return. This is where the mastery lies, not in control, but in permission. The permission to receive without guilt, to rest without justification, to embody what you once only visualized. Because now your field is ready, your body has remembered, and your reality is listening. You'll notice it in small ways first. A conversation that doesn't drain you. A decision that feels peaceful, instead of pressured. A moment where your old trigger arises, but your nervous system no longer follows. These are not small. These are seismic, because they mark the stabilization of a new tone. And tone is everything. Tone is the hidden structure of frequency, the scaffolding of timelines. And when your tone changes, reality responds not immediately, but inevitably. And when it does, you won't need to prove that you earned it. You'll know you allowed it. You'll feel the coherence in your bones, the clarity in your chest, the stillness behind your thoughts. You'll move slower, speak softer, breathe deeper. Not because you're trying to be spiritual, but because there's nothing left to resist. No identity to defend. No timeline to chase. Just resonance. Just reality mirroring back what you've become. So take this in. You are not being tested. You are being tuned. Life is not asking you to achieve faster. It's asking you to become clearer, to refine your signal until it stops contradicting itself, until your mind stops trying to override your body, until your soul stops waiting for conditions to feel safe enough to land, until the now feels like enough, not because it contains everything, but because it contains you. And when you are fully present, the field is fully responsive. That's the quiet miracle, that your presence is the shift, that your awareness is the magnet, that your breath right now is either opening or closing the door to what's already yours. So ask yourself, not with judgment, but with love, what am I broadcasting when I'm not trying to perform? What frequency is beneath my habits? What tone lingers beneath my words? This is your real work, not to chase, but to tune. Because once your tone stabilizes, your future doesn't just happen, it arrives. The reason this moment feels different is not because your circumstances have drastically changed, but because you have begun to hold yourself differently within them. You've softened the grip, not given up, just stopped tightening around every outcome as if your worth depended on it. This is not laziness. This is energetic refinement. The mature signal of someone who is no longer trying to bend the universe to their timeline, but instead learning how to inhabit the version of self that can already feel the timeline bending, inward, curving softly toward them, not as a result of shouting, but from stillness, not from effort, but from clarity, not from a checklist of manifestations done correctly, but from the quiet authority that lives in every breath that is no longer braced. If this sounds too gentle to be powerful, that's only because the world taught you power must be loud. But, in quantum terms, the most potent shifts occur without announcement. No drum roll, no grand finale. Just a soft snap inside your nervous system when the old fear no longer runs the script. That's when the energy releases. That's when the pattern rewrites. That's when life begins to change, not because you commanded it, but because you allowed it to catch up with who you've become. And who are you becoming? Someone who no longer equates movement with progress. Someone who knows that presence does more than planning. That breath regulates timelines. That stillness isn't the absence of action. It's the origin of aligned action. You're becoming the person who recognizes that chasing is often a disguised fear of being still. That trying to fix yourself is often a distraction from feeling yourself. That the version of you who lives in peace is not far away, but only obscured by the noise of needing to be more. You're remembering that becoming doesn't mean escaping your past. It means integrating it without letting it speak louder than your now. It means noticing when your body flinches at softness because it still expects love to come with conditions. It means staying open even when it would be easier to perform confidence. It means holding your desire without squeezing it, loving your vision without needing it to save you, and allowing joy to enter through the back door quiet, unassuming, gentle as a morning without alarms. Your timeline doesn't shift when the outside world changes. It shifts the moment your inner world stops opposing it. You don't need to force an outcome. You need to stop emitting frequencies that cancel it out. And the deepest frequency cancellation happens when the body says yes and the nervous system says no. That's why you felt blocked, not because you're broken, but because part of you still equates desire with danger. So how do you change that? You don't muscle your way through it. You hold space for the contradiction. You let the part of you that is afraid speak, not to control, but to be witnessed. You sit with a younger self who learned that love had to be earned, that safety came with silence, that worthiness was performance. And you breathe, not to override her, but to invite her into a reality where those rules no longer apply. This is frequency recalibration. This is emotional resonance. This is the actual alchemy behind manifestation, not scripting more pages, but rewriting the emotional contracts you didn't even know you signed. Because once your system believes it's safe to receive, you stop trying to trick the field into giving. You no longer pray with clenched fists. You no longer visualize with a stomach full of knots. You no longer fake gratitude. You feel it. Not because everything is perfect, but because you no longer believe perfection is required. You've stopped waiting for conditions. You've remembered that the condition is you, and when you change, the field changes. Not out of loyalty, but out of law. This is how you bend reality, not through effort, but through emotional coherence, through cellular clarity, through breath that no longer holds its breath, through a tone that tells the truth. You don't need to yell to be heard in the quantum. You need to resonate, to hum with the frequency of someone who trusts timing, not because they know when, but because they know who they've become. And what you've become is no longer afraid to receive. Not afraid to be seen, not afraid to pause low enough for the deeper truths to catch up. You've become the signal beneath the noise, not the noise itself. You are no longer trying to perform for the universe. You are participating with it. You are listening as much as you speak. You are co-creating from a place of nervous system safety, not trauma urgency. And that is what makes everything change. Maybe. This is the invitation you didn't know you needed. To stop auditioning for a life that's already written into your field. To stop knocking on doors that only open when you stand still enough to hear the invitation echoing from inside. To stop strategizing your alignment and start trusting your tone. Because your tone, when coherent, opens every door you once believed was locked. Because your breath steady sends a message louder than any vision board. Because your body, when safe, becomes the portal through which realities land. You don't have to do it perfectly. You just have to do it consistently. To pause when the urge to chase returns. To breathe when the fear of stillness arrives. To soothe, not scold, the parts that resist. Because resistance is never the enemy. It's just a frequency that hasn't been met with safety yet. And now you know how to offer that safety. Now you know how to recognize the signal beneath the impulse. Now you know the difference between action and alignment, between force and flow, between effort and embodiment. So let this be your reminder. When in doubt, soften. When confused, breathe. When afraid, listen. And when lost, return to coherence, not as a concept, but as a practice. A moment-by-moment attunement to the tune. You who no longer believes healing must be hard, success must be dramatic, or growth must be visible. The real growth? It's how quiet you've become inside, how gently you speak to yourself, how clearly you hear when something is no longer aligned, how easily you walk away from what once felt like your only option. That's frequency. That's resonance. That's the language of timelines shifting not through storms, but through stillness. And now that you've begun to stabilize that tone, hold it. Not with pressure, but with reverence. Protect it. Nourish it. Trust it. Because the signal is no longer beneath the noise. It is the noise. It is the pattern. Now, it's who you are when you stop trying to become. There's something profound about the moment you stop needing your transformation to look dramatic in order to believe it's real. When you stop measuring growth by external milestones and start sensing it in your posture, in your breath, in the space between thoughts. That's when you know the shift has happened. Not because the world suddenly applauded you, but because your inner world no longer shouts to be seen. The loudest change is the one that no longer seeks proof, because the nervous system already believes it. And when belief settles into the body, not as hope, but as baseline, that's where Timelines shift without needing thunder. You've probably lived much of your life looking for signs that things are working. A certain result, a certain feeling, a moment of clarity so overwhelming that it wipes out all doubt. But clarity isn't always overwhelming. Sometimes it arrives as a subtle inner yes. A moment where you realize you no longer need to convince yourself, that you trust the path without needing every step mapped, that you're no longer orbiting your desire like a satellite trying to stay in range. You've become the signal itself, quiet, stable, undeniable. This is where your old metrics dissolve. The way you used to measure progress, by validation, by productivity, by visibility, no longer applies. Now you track coherence, how quickly you return to center after disruption, how calmly you notice resistance without being seduced by it, how easily you say no to what doesn't match your frequency, not out of avoidance, but out of trust. This isn't detachment. This is sovereignty. The kind of sovereignty that doesn't need to prove itself because it no longer negotiates with old frequencies. And yet, there's a tenderness here too, because part of you still remembers the version that chased, that held so tightly, that performed love and swallowed silence in exchange for belonging. You don't need to erase her. You don't need to correct her. You simply need to hold her without needing her to speak for you anymore. She was never the enemy. She was the bridge. And now you've crossed it. Now, you don't wait for the field to bring the shift. You bring the field with you, in your tone, in your walk, in the way you pause before speaking, as if consulting something deeper than thought. You're no longer waiting for a future self to rescue you from your timeline. You've stopped outsourcing your becoming to the next ritual, the next full moon, the next breakthrough, because you've realized softly but irrevocably that the ritual was never about control. It was always about attunement. And now you are attuned, and so you move differently. You manifest not because you crave control, but because you're in resonance with trust. You rest not as an escape, but as a return. You create not to prove value, but to express coherence. And the field? It responds in kind, because the field has always responded in kind. Even in the moments where it felt silent, it was echoing your vibration back to you. Not to punish, to reflect, to clarify, to tune. You are not behind. You are not broken. You're remembering how to read your own frequency, how to sit with it long enough that it starts to harmonize instead of resist. And this harmony? It's not a product of perfection. It's the outcome of presence, the consistency of being with yourself over and over without judgment, until the old signals no longer hold dominance, until your reality begins to reshape itself around the you who no longer vibrates in fear. But this isn't an ending. It's a return to an origin point you forgot existed, before the performance, before the noise, before the timelines got tangled with effort. You've found your tone again. And that tone, soft, stable, clear, is the technology through which your next chapters arrive. This is what the field is truly listening for. Not your hustle, not your mastery of technique, but your willingness to inhabit the version of yourself that no longer contracts around the possibility of expansion. The you who doesn't need to grip. The you who doesn't call alignment a strategy. The you who simply is and lets that be enough. And when you live from that signal, your life will change, not because you shouted louder, but because you stopped contradicting your truth. You stopped holding two tones at once, wanting and bracing, calling and hiding, speaking and whispering. But not yet. That duality is gone. Or at least, it no longer holds the microphone. And what's left is clarity. And what clarity does is quiet. It calms the body. It clears the noise. It creates space, because clarity doesn't mean you'll never be afraid again. It means you'll no longer obey fear when it tries to reroute your signal. It means you'll stop bargaining with the past. It means you'll stop waiting for a life that only arrives when your frequency stabilizes long enough to welcome it. So, now you move in rhythm with yourself. You walk slower, not because you're hesitant, but because you trust the path. You speak with pauses, not because you're unsure, but because you respect the space between words. You listen to the body, not as a fragile instrument, but as a divine tuner. Because your body knows. Your body remembers. Your body has been the compass all along. And when you let it lead not from impulse, but from awareness, your life organizes itself around a new magnetic truth that you were never meant to chase. You were meant to resonate, to hum, to broadcast, to attract what was already encoded into your field, and to let go of the static that convinced you otherwise. So maybe you don't need another plan. Maybe you don't need to wait for perfect confidence, or perfect language, or perfect alignment. Maybe you just need to hold your tone, hold your signal, let it stabilize, let it echo, let it draw toward you everything that can hear it, and trust that it will be heard, not just by the field, but by the parts of you that forgot they could trust your voice, because you're no longer just a seeker, you're a signal. So if something in you feels quieter now, not empty, but steadier, trust that. Let that stillness be your confirmation. Not because everything is resolved, but because your signal is finally clear. You're no longer bracing for proof. You're no longer orbiting your worth. You've remembered how to hum beneath the noise, how to breathe without bargaining, how to live without apology. The shift you've been waiting for wasn't something coming toward you. It was something waiting for you to stop running long enough to feel it arrive. And now that you have, stay here a little longer. Let your nervous system memorize this ease. Let your next steps move not from urgency, but from rhythm. And when doubt returns, as it sometimes will return to the tone, not the thought, return to breath, to coherence, to presence. Because this signal isn't fleeting. It's who you are when you stop trying. Subscribe to our channel so we can meet again next time. Other stories are already waiting for you. Quiet ones. True ones. Ones that already know how to find you once you tune in.